911 location of your emergency.
Hi, something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
What is the rest of the address?
Oh, Kings Road.
November 13th, 2022. Moscow, Idaho. A town of quiet streets and college dreams, shattered in the span of minutes. 4 students, young, vibrant, full of life, found brutally murdered in their off-campus home. No witnesses, no murder weapon, only a trail of shadows and silence. But behind the horror lies a haunting question. What compels a man trained to study crime to commit it? This is the story of the house on King Road and the chilling hunt for the one who stalked its halls. Saturday, November 12th, 2022, a typical college weekend. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan, best friends since childhood, spent the night downtown, bar hopping, laughing, ending the night with takeout pasta from a popular food truck. Just a few blocks away, Zana Kernodle and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin were wrapping up a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity. By 2 a.m., all 4 returned to 1122 King Road, their home, their sanctuary. But by dawn, it would become a crime scene so brutal, investigators would compare it to a horror film. It was around 4 a.m., the house on 1122. King Road was supposed to be asleep, but something was wrong. Inside her room on the first floor, Dylan Mortensen, one of 2 surviving roommates, stirred from her sleep. She later told police that she heard what she believed was Zana crying. The sound drifted down from the second floor, faint but unmistakable. Something was happening. Then, a girl's voice, distant, frightened, murmured something chilling. "There's someone here." Dylan froze, her heart pounding. She opened her bedroom door, listened, and then a male voice, calm, reassuring, but too calm and too rehearsed, like someone mimicking empathy. "It's okay, I'm gonna help you." But this wasn't help. This was death, disguised in a whisper. At the same time, outside, about 50 feet from the house, a neighbor's security camera caught something terrifying. The sound was quick, final, the kind of sound that buries itself into memory. Back inside, Dylan opened her bedroom door again, and that's when she saw him. She said next that he was wearing all black. A mask covered his nose and mouth. He walked right past me. He had bushy eyebrows. That's all I could see. A man, silent, focused, walked straight toward her, but he didn't stop. He turned and slipped through the sliding glass door into the cold darkness. And just like that, he was gone. Dylan locked her door, terrified, confused, maybe convincing herself it was just a nightmare or some stranger leaving the wrong house. But upstairs, 4 of her friends lay bleeding, some still, some not yet gone, and the hours ticked by. No one called 911, not yet, because no one truly knew what horror had happened, not until the silence gave way to the sound of sirens. 8 hours too late, hours passed, no 911 call, no alarms. Inside the home, cell phones lit up with scrolling texts and missed calls, the kind of ghostly activity that makes you question what the dead leave behind. It wasn't until nearly noon, 11:58 a.m., that the call was finally made. The operator was told someone was unconscious. When police arrived, they found 4 bodies, 4 futures erased in silence and blood. Inside 1122 was a scene no first responder should ever have to witness. It wasn't just a crime scene. It was a house of nightmares. Every room whispered violence. Every corner told a story of fear, of confusion, of final moments. At the top of the stairs in one of the bedrooms, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan were found, together in the same bed. There were no defensive wounds on either girl, suggesting they never even had time to scream. They were likely killed in their sleep, swiftly, silently. 2 best friends. side by side, unaware that death had entered their home. On the floor below was Zana Kernodle and her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. Police believe Ethan was the first to be attacked, possibly ambushed in the hallway or doorway. There are signs he never saw it coming. Zana, on the other hand, did. Her body told a very different story. Defensive wounds, bruises, cuts across her hands and arms. She had fought back, hard. She had fought to live. But the killer was faster and relentless. The killer's method. There was no forced entry, no signs of sexual assault, no valuables missing. Whoever came into that house and didn't come to rob, they came to kill, and only to kill. And they did it with precision and rage. Some wounds were deep and targeted, others wild and frenzied. This wasn't random. This wasn't clumsy. This was surgical, personal, intimate. And just as suddenly as the killer arrived, they vanished. No trail, no blood tracked outside, no weapon left behind, save for the knife sheath, a chilling breadcrumb. It was a murder that baffled even seasoned investigators. Who could do this? And how did they get in and out without a single scream being heard? In the weeks that followed the murders, the town of Moscow, Idaho, was frozen in fear. A killer had walked through a college neighborhood undetected and vanished without a trace. Panic spread. Classes went remote. Students packed up and fled home. Parents demanded answers. The police were tight-lipped. The public was restless. And behind the scenes, the investigation was growing desperate. Thousands of tips flooded in. Everyone had a theory, a suspicion, a hunch. Was it a jealous ex? A stalker? Someone with a grudge against the Greek system? But most leads led nowhere until a piece of video surveillance changed everything. From a street camera just blocks from the crime scene, police spotted a white Hyundai Elantra. Not once, not twice, but multiple times, circling the neighborhood between 3:30 and 4:20 a.m. It was the same window the killer was believed to have struck. It didn't belong to anyone in the house. No students nearby drove it, and it hadn't been reported stolen. That car, was a ghost. But police believed it was the key. They tracked down the make, model, and year. They ran searches across state lines, and finally, they found a match. The car was registered to a man named Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student in criminology, just 10 miles away at Washington State University. At first glance, he was quiet, intelligent, focused, a teacher's assistant who graded papers and held office hours. But when investigators dug deeper, what they found was chilling. Kohberger wasn't just studying criminal behavior, he was obsessed with it. In online forums and academic platforms, he had posted psychological surveys directed at ex-convicts. What were you thinking during your crimes? What emotions did you experience while planning or committing them? What did you feel afterward? It was a fascinating research project on the surface, but with hindsight, it read more like a blueprint, the kind of curiosity that seems clinical, until it turns personal. He didn't just want to understand the minds of killers. Some believe he wanted to become one. Even the most meticulous killers leave traces. And Bryan Kohberger, despite his education, despite his planning, left behind just enough. His cell phone, a silent witness. It had pinged near the victim's house at least a dozen times in the weeks before the murders. 12 times, 12 moments of presence, 12 breadcrumbs on the digital map. He wasn't just passing through, he was watching, studying patterns, learning the layout. But on the night of November 13th, something changed. His phone went dark, airplane mode, no pings, no signal, until 4:48 a.m. That's when it came back online, miles away, almost as if it were rejoining the grid after a crime had been committed. To investigators, that silence spoke volumes. Then came the most damning piece of evidence, and the one mistake no killer wants to make: a crowbar knife sheath, military style, left behind on Madison's bed. On it, DNA. Not Madison's, not Kaylee's. a male profile. It didn't match anyone in the system, so police went upstream to his family's trash, all the way in Pennsylvania. A discarded coffee cup, a cheek swab, a genetic connection that linked straight to Bryan Kohberger. In his quest to be unseen, he left a signature behind, and the deeper they looked, the darker it got. Months before the murders, Kohberger had been digitally stalking 3 of the victims, following their lives on Instagram, liking photos, sending late-night messages that were never answered. Hey, you up? Why won't you respond? To them, he was just another stranger in the noise. To him, they were the center of his fixation. After the murders, he wasn't done. He Googled the type of knife used in the attack, read articles about the investigation, kept tabs on the coverage, as if watching his own story unfold. The selfie. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came not from blood or fiber, but from his camera roll, just hours after the slaughter. Kohberger snapped a selfie, smiling, thumbs up, calm, detached, almost pleased. It was a portrait that suggested not guilt, but satisfaction. On December 30th, 2022, police surrounded a home in Pennsylvania. Bryan Kohberger was arrested in the quiet pre-dawn hours, miles from the horror he had allegedly created. In court, he stood silent, expressionless, almost clinical. The judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. His legal team began building their wall, autism diagnosis, offered as an explanation for social awkwardness and behavior. Dylan Mortenson's account, questioned for accuracy, memory, and timing, attempts to suppress the knife sheath DNA, the phone records, the surveillance. But the prosecution had their own arsenal: intent, obsession, a timeline that didn't lie, a man who studied crime and allegedly tried to perfect it, but left behind the most human trace of all: DNA. He thought he could commit the perfect murder. But even the smartest criminals forget one thing: every killer leaves a trail. December 30th, 2022. A quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania. FBI agents surrounded a suburban home, their movements careful, deliberate. Inside is Bryan Kohberger. He was thousands of miles from the crime scene, but the evidence had followed him across the country. They knocked, they entered. He didn't resist. The man who once studied criminal minds was now the subject of a national manhunt. In court, Kohberger did something unusual, something telling. He didn't speak. He didn't plead. He stood silent. By law, when a defendant refuses to enter a plea, the judge does it for them. Not guilty. But the silence hung in the air like smoke. Was it strategy? Or something deeper? A sign of detachment? Superiority? The same man who had asked convicts how they felt during their crimes now faced the weight of 4 brutal murders and said nothing. Kohberger's legal team began laying the groundwork for reasonable doubt. They cited a diagnosis, autism spectrum disorder, suggesting this might explain his social awkwardness, emotional flatness, or obsessive behavior. They questioned the memory of Dylan Mortenson, the surviving roommate, implying that what she heard or saw might have been misinterpreted or affected by shock. They filed motions to suppress key evidence, especially the knife sheath DNA, the cell phone data, and surveillance footage. Anything that could poke holes in the timeline. And they hammered one point: no motive, no confession. Without that, could a jury truly believe this man was capable of such cold, calculated violence? But the prosecutors weren't shaken. They didn't need a motive scribbled in a notebook. They had something stronger: intent, obsession, and cold forensic evidence. A suspect who studied criminology at the PhD level, drove past the house again and again, followed the victims online, killed with precision, disappeared into the night. He thought he could commit the perfect crime. But even the most careful killer can't escape biology. That knife sheath left near Madison's body, the one with the snap unfastened, perhaps pulled in a rush, mid-attack. It held a trace of DNA, just enough to open the door. And once that door opened, his world began to unravel. Bryan Kohberger had spent years studying crime. Now he was part of one, a criminologist accused of crossing a line. From observation to execution, a man who allegedly wanted to know what it felt like, and may have chosen to feel nothing at all. Madison, Kaylee, Zana, Ethan. 4 names. Now etched in memory. Not because of what they did wrong, but because of how they were taken. They were young, bright, and full of promise. Madison Mogen, the creative soul, known for her kindness and contagious laughter. Kaylee Goncalves, spirited, ambitious, days away from moving to start her future. Zana Kernodle, full of energy and fight, someone who didn't back down easily. Ethan Chapin, a gentle, smiling presence, a brother, a twin, a boyfriend. They were college students, living out what should have been the best chapter of their lives, sharing a home filled with music, laughter, and midnight conversations. But all of that was stolen in a moment of unimaginable cruelty. This was not just a story about violence. It was about lives full of light, extinguished far too soon. What happened that night didn't just shake a small college town in Idaho. It echoed across the country, into every parent's worst fear and every student's quiet nightmare. The idea that something so horrific could happen in a place so ordinary, a house on a hill, a campus full of dreams. That's what made this tragedy so devastating. It felt close, even to those far away. Today, there are memorials, tributes, and scholarships in their names, but there's also an emptiness, a quiet void in every room they once filled. Madison, Kaylee, Zana, and Ethan, they were not defined by what happened to them. They were defined by who they were and who they would have become. And now, their story stands as a haunting reminder that even in the safest places, darkness can still find a way in. August 11th, 2025. It's more than just a date. It's the day the world stops to listen, the day when facts will meet the face behind the horror, when the prosecution lays out the trail of evidence and the defense tries to unravel it, thread by thread. It's been nearly 3 years since that cold November morning. 3 years of grief, questions, and a community grasping for closure. And now, all eyes turn to the courtroom. Will the DNA, the digital breadcrumbs, and the survivor's memory hold up? Will the mask of studied detachment, worn by a man who once analyzed crime, finally be stripped away? Or will the case unravel into technicalities and shadows? Because this trial isn't just about a suspect. It's about restoring peace to 4 grieving families. It's about truth piercing the silence that's lingered over a house on King Road. And that house, it still stands in the minds of many, not as a home, but as a tomb. A place once filled with youth, now filled with echoes. Some say the house should be torn down. Others believe it should remain. A memorial, a reminder. But no matter what happens, one thing is certain. The shadows of King Road still whisper, and they will keep whispering until justice answers.